want to see Russia weaken.
Time is running out.
What the fuck are you doing, people? Playing video games? Taking care of you? Hoping and praying that the Democrats don't lose the midterms? Are you clenching your eyes closed that Biden, the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in human history, threatens a possible nuclear Armageddon?
It could end in Armageddon.
And that Putin, the president of Russia, the country with the most nuclear weapons, threatens that every weapon they possess is on the table and that they're not bluffing?
Это не блеф.
That there's an openly stated proxy war that gets more out of control by the week? In fact, the Russian defense minister threatened just this past week what he called uncontrolled escalation.
Uncontrolled escalation.
Or are you swallowing the line that you've been fed, that this is a war of autocracy versus democracy? Again, I ask, but more pointedly, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? Have you watched, thought about, and told everyone you know and shouted from the rooftops, people? You need to watch the excerpt from the Bob Avakian interview on the last RNL show where Bob Avakian says what no one else will say, what the real deal is, what the truth is. What am I talking about? A rare and special 3-part interview with the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian on this, the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show premiering next week, November 3rd. But wait, you're not going to tell anyone about Bob Avakian BA on the RNL show because then they're going to push back and maybe cancel you? Because they say BA and the Revcoms are a cult? And maybe you have thought that a little bit yourself, because otherwise, why would so many people say that? Besides, they don't want to listen to an old white man. And also you kind of don't like the idea of leaders. You don't want or need anyone to lead you. Well, I'm not sorry to break it to you that you are being led by the nose into keeping the madness and the way this system oppresses literally billions of people to stay just the way they are. You are just parroting those who actually rule the system and those who want to stick their snout in the trough of a system that feeds off the people of the world. Cult, old white leader. I don't want any leaders. Idiotic drivel. Nothing more than ingrained and constantly promoted ignorance of this dog-eat-dog system that frees you from any critical thought. And when it spews out of your mouth, you give voice and are doing the work of those who rule, saying, stay away from revolution. Don't go near anything that could lead people to rise up and overthrow the system that is chewing up humanity and threatening the future. Keeping from people the possibility of working for a radically new society so that we, the masses of people, could really go to work on the truly life and death problems that the 8 billion people on the planet face. Maybe you don't want to say that or admit it to yourself, so you just keep it to yourself, while those who rule and enforce and perpetuate the capitalist system keep on doing what they're doing at great cost to the people of the world. So go on thinking or hurling accusations of cult to keep yourself and others from hearing Bob Avakian, the most radical voice today, the voice of a real revolution, a revolution to emancipate all of humanity all over the world. And to those of you who are looking forward to the Bob Avakian interviews, who appreciate what Bob Avakian says, but then are turning away from struggling with others, look, then all you are doing is turning your back on what you know to be true and right. But to get out and fight for this, you would have to get out of your comfort zone and risk and sacrifice something, maybe even a lot. So if you are with me up to now, if you don't want to wallow in self-imposed or self-satisfied ignorance, or if you don't want to be someone who has betrayed their own convictions, then get on board to make the rare appearance of Bob Avakian on this, the RNL show, starting next week, a really big deal that thousands of people watch. Join us in letting thousands and thousands of people experience Bob Avakian, a person who's full of heart and soul, a person on fire with a scientific method and approach and a poetic spirit, all of which leads him to being really hardcore for a real revolution. And with that, I want to welcome you to this, the 125th episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. My name is Andy Zee, and I'm the host of the show, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. So I want to welcome my co-host, Sunsara Taylor.
Andy, it's so good to be with you today. You're hitting very hard, and I'm glad you are. We've got a really important show coming up next week and the following 2 weeks, and today we're going to focus on this. We're going to get into this 3-part interview that's premiering next week with Bob Avakian, as Andy was talking about. We're going to talk with you about how you can play a role, all of you, a very big role in getting this out to many, many other people who need to see it. And we wanted to acknowledge right at the top of the show today that we have more than twice as many views on last week's episode. We were heartened to see this. A lot of you watched, some of you, many of you more than once, the initial excerpt that we showed from Bob Avakian dealing with the emergency that faces humanity in Ukraine. We want to welcome everybody else who tuned in for the first time, all our new viewers. All of us have a big role to play in spreading this. We need many, many thousands more tuning in next week for the premieres across the country and in person, where we're holding them in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and Berkeley.
Sunsara, the importance of what Bob Avakian says about the nature and the extreme and present danger that is posed by the imperialist powers in relationship to the Ukraine war and to China cannot be overestimated. A longtime peace activist, a Roman Catholic priest, and a voice of conscience, Bob Bassi, wrote that the analysis was spot on. This is a proxy war now, with a real danger of becoming an outright war between the U.S. and Russia. Last week, we played this short excerpt from Chuck Todd, a major imperialist news person who is the news director for NBC and the host of Meet the Press.
And notice the United States isn't pushing back on the rhetoric. The Russians are going, hey, the U.S. is fighting a proxy war against us. I think the answer is yes, we are.
I began today's program with how the danger has only heightened this past week. The analysis that BA puts forward in the answer to the first question in our second interview that we showed last week, unrehearsed and straight ahead, is not just spot on, but it is not what anyone else will say, and yet it is the damn reality. This is an analysis, a struggle with how people are not confronting that reality, and it is sounding the alarm. Watch this excerpt from last week's show.
You can see that this is a battle between imperialist powers, all of which, on both sides, have whole histories of horrendous atrocities and, base themselves on vicious exploitation of people and oppression of people all over the world. This is what's at stake. And I just have to say, certain people who have postured as being progressive have come out and made the most outrageous statements in the context thing. And I'm going to say it, little Stephen, coming out and saying, well, we're more powerful than Russia. Why don't we just bomb the shit out of them? I mean, what are these people thinking? They're so committed, ultimately, despite their progressive pretensions, they're so committed to U.S. imperialism that they've almost lost their fucking minds. What do you think is going to happen? You go bomb Russia. Why don't we just wipe out all their air force? I mean, this kind of talk is like totally reckless and irresponsible. And when it comes from people with so-called progressive pretensions, it's all the more disgusting. I just have to say that. And people need to get up off this American chauvinism. This country, look, and some of the same people who will rattle on about the whole history of this country and slavery and all that, turn around and, and are either silent or openly supportive of the same system when it goes into the international arena to enforce its parasitism of plundering and exploiting people all over the world, because I guess they have a little bit of a sense. It's like somebody once said, somebody once wrote saying, living in this country is a little bit like living in the house of Tony Soprano. You know that there's a lot of goodies coming in. You don't know exactly, maybe you're not really entirely up on what Tony Soprano's doing out there, but you kind of have a sense that whatever he's doing, and however fucked up you might think it would be, is allowing you to have all the goodies that comes from living in the house. And that's what the attitude of a lot of these American chauvinists, so-called progressives, And people need to get up off this and wake up to what's actually happening and you think the history of this ruling class in this country is somehow divorced from what they do in the world as a whole? Do you think their nature changes when they go outside the borders of the U.S. and all of a sudden they become, really kind-hearted people, who are carrying out charity around the world? Yeah, they do some charity to cover up the crimes that they're committing.
That's just a small part of what Bob Avakian gets into in this excerpt from our interview. And he concludes with a critical point that he made in an article last spring.
The masses of people in the world, and this is very acutely and urgently posed now, the masses of people in the world cannot any longer afford. It was always terrible that these are the people ruling the world, but it's now acutely posed. We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to dominate the world and to determine the destiny of humanity. They need to be overthrown as quickly as possible.
Hearing this, you might say, well, yeah, we shouldn't let them continue to rule, but what can we do, really? Well, the first thing we can do is watch and get as many people as we can to watch the special next 3 RNL shows with the interview from Bob Avakian. There are answers there. And I said at the beginning of today's show that what Bob Avakian sharply poses in this segment is the forbidden answer, the cold truth that is nonetheless true. People may not want to hear it. They'll resist getting into it. He challenges people, but think about this. He says this is an inter-imperialist war. Is that true? If so, what really are the interests of the people here and internationally? Is it true that the U.S., as the most powerful imperialist country, not just now, but in history, and as such, is the #1 oppressor of the people of the world? If so, don't people here need to not knee-jerk get behind their ruling class who pose as liberators and defenders of the people of the Ukraine, but in reality are very far from being liberators of anyone? BA says that those who rule must be overthrown through revolution. Isn't it true that imperialists will not and in fact cannot decide to be the good guys and liberators? And therefore, doesn't that argue that people need to get serious and watch Bob Avakian in these interviews for themselves and do so for the future of humanity? And so with that, we want to get deeper into these interviews, what they're about, and the response we've gotten to the interviews, both positive and negative, and have some struggle about how we're going to get thousands and thousands of people to watch and engage over the next 3 weeks. Sunsara, we approach these interviews with Bob Avakian recognizing their importance at this moment. This is a juncture when humanity confronts whether or not there will be a future. Whether from the devastation of an all-out inter-imperialist war or from the destruction of the environment by the predatory capitalist system, our responsibility was all the more because Bob Avakian has analyzed that the situation in this country at this moment, with the great irreconcilable divide among those who rule, the great divide that cleaves the country as a whole, a divide that cannot be overcome through the normal ways that have prevailed since the Civil War 155 years ago. Because of this, Bob Avakian has analyzed that this situation gives rise to a rare time when revolution could be possible in this country if there is a force of thousands and then millions brought forward starting now. So, Bob Avakian stepping out at such a time with all the risk that entails to sit down with the RNL show is a responsibility that we took very seriously. We knew, too, that we carried the hopes and dreams of all of you watching and millions more. We asked questions that we both thought needed to be spoken to and questions that we thought that you would ask, including that people want to know about Bob Avakian, what he's like. So we asked about his life experiences, and even our political questions asked him to speak to his formative experiences along his journey. The 3 interviews we did are a journey that we are inviting you to take along with us.
So the first interview that we did is going to premiere next week on November 3rd. And in this first interview, we jumped right in by asking Bob Avakian whether he always has the view that he does of this country, the firm denunciation of America and American imperialism. Did you always have this view of America? And if not, how did you first come to see this country in this way and its role in the world?
Oh no. I was a very loyal American. You know, I think I said in my memoir that one time I said I felt like getting down on my knees and thanking God that I was born in this great country, unlike all these other unfortunate people all around the world who were, forced to live in other countries. And I remember when I was 16, I think, I went to a baseball game, a Giants baseball game in San Francisco, and of course they played the national anthem before, and so, everybody rose and I got up and I enthusiastically was singing, oh, say, can you see, et cetera, et cetera. And when it finished, the woman in front of me turned around and said, "My, you have a beautiful voice." And I just can't help thinking back about the irony of that, But then, as I did learn things, I used to go to the games and this was during the Vietnam War. When they would play the national anthem, I did a different version that someone I knew was part of the movement that I was part of made up, which was, "Oh, Uncle Sam, get out of Vietnam, get out, get out, get out of Vietnam." So that was a different rendition of the song, and didn't get quite the same response from the people in front of me, but that was a transformation I went through, and it was a lot of different things. I grew up in Berkeley.
And from there, it was on. We covered questions of religion, science and the scientific method. What is a real revolution? And why, as Andy said, this is a rare time when revolution is more possible.
And we asked about a key breakthrough of the new communism, a repudiation of revenge, of the last shall be first and the first shall be last, and instead the insistence that the means of making a revolution and in the new society must be at all times consistent with its ends.
We also asked Bob Avakian about the individualism, the me that permeates this culture and this society. And we asked him about the importance of struggling with people to change their thinking and why having a poetic spirit matters if you're going to lead a revolution. Again, the premiere of these interviews, the first installment, airs next Thursday on this YouTube channel, and it's a must-watch.
And then in the second interview, which airs on November 10th, we began with the danger of war and then ranged widely over questions of revolution. Why and how the future we face will be either something terrible or something truly emancipating. We also asked why the struggle for the liberation of women is a cornerstone of the revolution for the emancipation of humanity.
And in our third interview, we time traveled into the future. We got into the society that we are fighting for, that a real revolution could bring into being. And again, we ranged widely. So now we want to play some voices from people around the country who are urging you to join them to tune in for and spread the word about these upcoming interviews.
Tune in November 3rd to a special episode of the R&L Revolution Nothing Less show, premiering a 3-part interview with Bob Avakian, the most important political thinker and leader in the world today.
I can't wait to watch the 3-part interview with Bob Avakian on the R&L show.
That's the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th.
And I'm listening on my phone to Bob Avakian, who I did not know was going to be on the show, which was a big treat because I'm one of those people that the last thing in the world that I wanted to do was follow a white man leading a revolutionary movement. And I thought, wait a minute, read it, And once I started reading Bob Avakian stuff, it was the stuff I believed in, I really resonated with it.
Now, if you've seen episode 124, then you've already begun to get a glimpse of BA's deep analysis on the situation in Ukraine. And hopefully you were provoked and challenged not to stay in your lane or not to side with one imperialist or the other, but instead provoked and challenged to go deeper into what's happening in the world and what's in the interest of humanity. Now, these special interviews with Bob Avakian should also give you a sense of his generosity of spirit, his heart for humanity, and a deep scientific analysis of what's going on in the world and why we need an actual revolution.
The thing that I've learned digging into Bob Avakian is that revolution is real and that his leadership is real and that the science that he has firmly put revolution on is real.
And that's what he does. He talks about the reality of what we're in and the reality of what we can do to make it different.
Get to know this leader for a time when the future hangs in the balance. Save the dates, November 3rd, November 10th, and November 17th.
And please, don't forget to tell others and have watch parties and discussions afterwards. Revolution, nothing less.
I also want to read what one young person in the Midwest had to say after watching the excerpt of BA's interview that we played last week. They wrote, "This is like a movie, and the plot of the movie is humanity are the underdogs, and we are trying to build a movement to save the world. You hear that in movies, but this is real. I came here looking for trouble, and did I find it? This is exactly what I was looking for. But whatever I imagined, this is more than that." So this gets to the very first thing that we want to call on you to do, to join with us to build for this. If you haven't yet, invite your friends and people you know to join you to watch the first interview on November 3rd together here on this channel. And if you're in Los Angeles, plan to come to the special screening that Andy and I will be attending in person to watch this first installment together. There will also be screenings in person at the Revolution Club Center in Chicago and at the Revolution bookstores in Berkeley and New York City.
Not surprisingly, there are others who watched the last episode and raised differences. One person said that though they really respect Bob Avakian and agree with much of what he says, this older person said the new generations don't want individual leaders, but instead only mass movements. Well, look. History is filled with heroic uprisings of people all over the world, even ones where people were able to top an oppressive ruler, only to end up back under the boot of oppressors once again, new or old. Think of all the beauty and courage in the streets in 2020 in this country against the police murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. That beautiful rising showed powerfully the potential for revolution, but it did not put an end to the ongoing white supremacist murder by the police. In fact, things are on an even more dangerous course now. And we know many of you and millions of people all over the world agonize over what it will take to finally get free. So we asked Bob Avakian about this. We asked him how he came to develop the strategy for a real revolution to be able to succeed. He shared riveting personal experience from working closely with leaders of the Black Panther Party and drawing lessons from the experience of other struggles around the world. Now think about the storms we are already living through in this country. And think of all the people, even ones who are not yet thinking about radical change, but who are going to be hit by disruptions to normal life in one way and then another. Jolts that can provoke a deep questioning of why things are the way they are, and couldn't they be different? Wouldn't it matter a lot for people to have a chance now to hear from Bob Avakian, so they can prepare and be a part of consciously fighting to wrench something positive out of the even bigger storms to come? This brings us to the second thing that we are calling on you to do. Spread the word about these interviews far and wide. At revcom.us, our website, we have downloadable posters to print and to get up on the walls everywhere, flyers that can be handed out at concerts and on trains, and social media graphics and video clips to spread to your networks.
A Revolution Club member in another city put his finger on something important when he said, "You're going to come up against relativism and identity politics and things keeping people stuck. We got to use this as an opportunity to cause controversy. This is a battle for the future." What stood out to me in watching the first excerpt is humanity can no longer afford to let these imperialists rule. We're at a crossroads, either extinction or revolution. And in our interviews, we ask Bob Avakian about all this identity politics that's so pervasive today. We ask him about the woke bullshit that has people caught up in canceling each other and canceling the truth. And BA got into this, into the method of it, as well as the damage it does. But he also stressed and he brought alive how people can change. In fact, right from the beginning, and throughout these interviews, BA shares about the many influences and changes that he has gone through in his own life.
The third thing we want to ask you to do right now is donate, and donate generously, and become a Patreon of this show. We want to appreciate the people who did sign up to be patrons in the last week. Look, it costs a lot of money to put this show together every week, for the rent, for the equipment, and the supplies. This is very important for us to be able to really take a big leap in the audience and in the production, and we need the financial support on a regular basis. That's what the Patreon is for. And we need big money to be able to promote these interviews all over the place. Lots of really good posters, advertising on the internet and in IRL. And so we're really calling on you to donate now very heavily and very generously to this show. I want to thank the people who gave donations, some large and some what people could afford. All of that is really appreciated. So donate today.
And the fourth thing that we want to ask you to do, the final thing, is to let us know what you're running into as you take this out to others. Bob Avakian is deeply loved and respected for the very same reason why he is hated and viciously attacked by other people. He is fighting for, and he embodies the most radical change with the world as it currently exists, a rupture with all the horrors and all the ugly ways that people relate to each other and are trained to think. So of course, those who are invested in this system, especially those who like to pose as radical, but are really just trying to find a better position for themselves within this nightmare of a world, are going to try to slander and keep other people from engaging BA. So we who care about humanity's future, all of us who hate oppression, all of us who yearn for the truth and for a better future for the world's children and people everywhere, we have to dig into BA ourselves, and we have to fight to spread these interviews everywhere. And we have to do this work together. As you can tell already from today's show, we've learned a lot, positive and negative, from the feedback that you have shared with us so far. And we need much more of this as we go forward together.
And with that, we want to close today's show, Sunsara, with giving you some more background into Bob Avakian and the formative experiences and the importance of the liberation of Black people in his life and his political development. On revcom.us, there's an article that you can still find there called BA for the Liberation of Black People and the Emancipation of All Humanity. We've made that into a 50-minute film. It has 7 parts. We're going to show you the first 2 parts of that.
We present Bob Avakian for the Liberation of Black People and the Emancipation of All Humanity. One of the things that comes through most powerfully in Bob Avakian's memoir is that a profound hatred for the oppression of Black people has been a defining part of Bob Avakian's life. From the time as a teenager, he learned about the lives of the Black people with whom he developed deep ties of friendship. Never feeling that because he is white, it is not his place to be involved in the struggle against this oppression, but on the contrary, determined to contribute whatever he could to this struggle, Bob Avakian, BA, from the time he worked closely with the Black Panther Party in its revolutionary days in the 1960s, has made the liberation of Black people a defining part of his life's commitment and work. As he developed as a revolutionary communist and emerged as the foremost revolutionary leader and thinker in the world, this commitment has become even deeper and has been strongly interwoven with a dedication to the emancipation of all humanity from every form of oppression and exploitation. Listen to Noche Diaz read what B.A. has written about his life's work.
Why was I doing the work I was doing? Once again, we're back to for whom and for what. I wasn't doing this work for myself. When I was young, in middle school, and then even more so in high school, my life got changed in a very major way by coming into contact with people that I hadn't really known that much before, in particular Black people. I started learning about their situation and how that relates to what goes on in this society as a whole. I was drawn to the culture, not just the music and art overall, but the whole way of going through the world of the Black people who became my friends and the world they introduced me to. And I came to the point of recognizing these are my people. Now, I knew they had a different life experience than I did, but these are my people. I don't see a separation. It's not like they are some other people over there who are going through all this, and somehow that's removed from me. These are my people. And then I began to recognize more deeply what people were being put through, the oppression they were constantly subjected to, the horrors of daily life, as well as the bigger ways in which the system came down on them. And as I went further through life and began to approach the question of what needs to be done about this, and was introduced to taking up a scientific approach to this, I realized that my people were more than this. I realized that my people were Chicanos and other Latinos and other oppressed people in the US. They were people in Vietnam and China. They were women. They were the oppressed and exploited of the world. And through some struggle and having to cast off some wrong thinking, I've learned that they are LGBT people as well. These are my people, the oppressed and exploited people of the world. They are suffering terribly, and something has to be done about this. So it is necessary to dig in and systematically take up the science that can show the way to put an end to all this and bring something much better into being. You have to persevere and keep struggling to go forward in this way. And when you run into new problems or setbacks, you have to go more deeply into this rather than putting it aside and giving up. But this is why I've been doing the work I've been doing.
Bob Avakian grew up in Berkeley, California. Unable, because of a life-threatening illness, to be directly involved in struggles taking place against racial oppression for several years after graduating from high school in 1961, B.A. nevertheless closely followed and strongly supported the civil rights movement in the early 1960s, and at the same time was influenced by and supportive of the militant stand and role of Malcolm X.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
This was reflected in an article that B.A. wrote at the age of 19 in 1962, supporting the struggle of Black people. This article was submitted to the liberal magazine Saturday Review. Although the article was not published, the editor-in-chief of the magazine, Norman Cousins, personally replied, indicating that although the magazine had chosen not to publish the article, he recognized that the article spoke in a strikingly compelling way to very important questions. Having recovered from his illness in 1964, B.A. became actively involved in the free speech movement at the University of California in Berkeley, where he was a student. The central issue of this movement was the right of students to carry out activity on the campus in support of the civil rights movement.
The idea that the university could come out with regulations prohibiting civil rights activity when people were dying in the South.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
B.A. was among the 800 who were arrested during the occupation of the University Administration Building, which was the high point of the movement and led to winning its demands. As the civil rights movement increasingly gave way to a more militant Black liberation movement in the second half of the 1960s, B.A. was strongly influenced by this. He left the university and dedicated his life to working for radical change. As a result of direct contact and discussions with Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, the founders of the Black Panther Party, and getting to know Eldridge Cleaver, who also became a leader of the BPP, B.A. worked closely with the Black Panther Party from its earliest days and at the height of its revolutionary role and influence. In 1967, BA attended rallies and spoke at one of the rallies held by the BPP in North Richmond to protest the killing there of Denzel Dow, part of the long and continuing chain of murders of black people by police. In 1968, when Huey Newton was facing murder charges as a result of a shootout with Oakland cops, BA spoke, along with a number of key figures in the Black Liberation Movement, including Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, James Foreman, and the leaders of the Black Panther Party, at a Free Huey rally held in the Oakland Auditorium on the occasion of Huey Newton's birthday.
I'm going to bring you on now a member of the Peace and Freedom Party who has worked diligently on behalf of Brother Huey. I give you Bob Avakian.
Now I want to say that I wouldn't be on the stage, we wouldn't have been at the Oakland Induction Center if it weren't for the courageous people, the masses of people and the leaders who led and participated in the black liberation struggle all these years. Because they're the ones that taught us. They're the ones that forced us to face what the reality of America and this system was all about. And in this sense, we say that not only are black people a vanguard, but they're an inspiration. We don't expect them to liberate us. We have to do that for ourselves. But they have inspired us to begin that struggle to end this imperialist, racist, colonial system once and for all.
BA worked tirelessly to build support, including among white people, for the demand to free Huey. At a Free Huey rally at the courthouse in Oakland where Huey Newton's trial was being held, BA was arrested for desecrating, burning the American flag. During this time, at the invitation of BPP leaders, BA wrote a number of articles for the Black Panther newspaper. At a rally of thousands led by the Black Panther Party on May 1st, 1969, BA spoke of the need for revolution and called on white people in particular to more actively take part in movements for revolutionary change in the U.S. and to support such movements throughout the world.
And let me say one thing to the white people in the audience. Now, you know, Bobby has been saying for a long time, we will not fight racism with racism. We refuse to stoop to the level of a racist to hate somebody because of the color of his skin. Well, that's fine. But I see a lot of white people walking around and say, oh, good. Now the Black Panther Party don't hate me. I can go on about my business. That's a cop-out. And if you act like that, the Black Panther Party will hate you. Not because you're white, but because you ain't taking care of business to organize other people. Teach them the need to support the Black Liberation Movement led by the Black Panther Party as a strong, fearless voice against American imperialism, and to link up with all the people in Vietnam, in China, in Angola, in Latin America, and everywhere else who are standing shoulder to shoulder to drive this vicious beast out of the way and out of the pages of history.
By the beginning of the 1970s, millions of people in this country were in favor of some kind of revolutionary change, but they faced profound challenges. How could this revolution be made? Or was it even possible to make a revolution here, up against such powerful forces of oppression and repression? Which were the key forces that had to be mobilized to have a real chance to carry out such a revolution? What kind of leadership was needed? And what methods and approaches should that leadership be based on? The difficulties in confronting and seeking the answers to these hard questions, combined with brutal and often murderous repression by the powers that be, led many revolutionary organizations, including the Black Panther Party, to split and end up departing from the road that could lead to real revolution.